Hello, and welcome to F1 Into the Barrier with me, George Close, reviewing the Monaco Grand Prix. And marshals, I'm going to try and do a speed run for you because I appreciate this is late. I've had a very busy week. The turnaround time on the races is incredibly quick at the moment. So I'm going to try and get through this quickly. I thought it was a pretty interesting Monaco Grand Prix. I liked it with the new cars, so it was quite interesting to see how they would cope around the most iconic track on the F1 circuit. And qualifying, I really enjoyed. Qualifying at Monaco is awesome. Just seeing the cars pushed and the drivers push the limit as they weave their way through the narrow streets of Monte Carlo. The big themes. It is going to be very hard for George Russell now to close this gap. And he was very hard done by, as were other drivers, by the penalties for speeding in the pit lane. I think you've probably all seen it about the measurement being the drivers were cutting fairly, which they're allowed to do, basically cutting the corner of the pit lane. But because of the measuring points that the FIA had set up, it was showing drivers as speeding by about 0.1 kilometers per hour. Pierre Gasly had his penalty overturned, which is interesting. So he got promoted to third after Isaac Hadjar's third place. But you think of all the other drivers in that mix with Colapinto, Lewis Hamilton, of course, George Russell, who really had their races, well, in George's instance, massively affected. I mean, George's penalty was unjust. He went in at a difficult time. You can understand why he pitted when he did, seeing the accident in front of him, and he had to make a split-second decision to react. And to be honest, had he not accidentally started working on his car in the double stack, then maybe it would have been the right call. So he ended up getting the drive-through penalty and is demoted out of the points. And his championship rival, Kimi Antonelli, his teammate, goes on to win the race. And it's tricky now for George because you're seeing the other teams being able to close the gap. You're seeing Ferrari being able to close the gap a bit. Red Bull, who topped the engine performance chart really interestingly, are also being able to close that gap now. We saw Max Verstappen have an excellent qualifying in P2. It was really unfortunate to not get off the line. And it was a shame that denied us probably something slightly more interesting on strategy. I mean, listen, it's Monaco. I don't think Max would have been able to get past Antonelli. And you could see the raw pace of Antonelli going around where he was building those gaps. And really, his performance wasn't reflected in the end result because of the safety cars and the red flag. And what I thought was also interesting on Ferrari Antonelli was the standing start. I do, listen, it makes it more fun. I was obviously excited to see if Lewis could get the launch on the line in the Ferrari. But I do think after a certain point of racing, I think if you going beyond the first quarter of a race, I don't think it's fair on the drivers that have managed to establish themselves getting out front to have to face the risk of a standing start. So anyway, it did make a huge amount of difference ultimately at the front of the field. But yes, very difficult for George Russell. I think we are seeing a resurgent Lewis Hamilton at the moment. He seems just really confident. He's got Kim Kardashian as openly his girlfriend, and he seems buoyed. He seems to be doing things for him. He seems to be happy with the brakes, and Charles not very happy with his brakes, and it looks like he's going to change them for Barcelona. And yeah, this whole Brembo brake and the different calipers involved. We can go into that maybe in the next episode. It's quite interesting. But we're seeing confidence. And when Lewis has confidence, he performs better. Out-qualifying his teammate is a huge part of that. And yeah, I think that's quite exciting. Outside of that, Pierre Gasly and Alpine finishing third is obviously a huge result. Obviously, it came after his penalty was rescinded. But that's pretty big. And Isaac Hadjar at least got to celebrate on the day on the podium and feel buoyed as a Red Bull driver. He performed. Yes, ultimately got taken over, but he performed when Max wasn't there. And that's a huge thing for the Red Bull second seat. And we're starting to see now that he's able to get performance closer to Max. And Max is still a better driver than Isaac Hadjar. Max is an incredibly gifted driver. But I think the Red Bull is a very good car. The Mercedes is clearly the best. And it's been difficult watching George not be able to put in some of the performances that he's capable of. But I think we should remember here, he has been a bit unfortunate. And the DNF in Canada was not his fault. He was superior that weekend. So the superiority of Antonelli, this narrative that's been developed, is maybe a little misleading because George actually had shown real promise throughout that time. I just think, yeah, the points gap now is very, very large. Anyway, marshals, a quick one. I'm sure many of you might even skip this one. So it's been very good to catch up, and I'll catch you next time out in Catalonia, in Barcelona, for the next Grand Prix. Thanks.